as it turned out, they did call back and had another position. The position was stated to be something that was involving a field propulsion system, which to me, in my mind, sounded something along the lines of some electromagnetic propulsion, something that might be used in space, maybe, I don't know, an ion drive system using mercury vapor or something like that. Or
You've always been fascinated by propulsion systems.
Anything with, exerts tremendous amount of energy, from, explosives to, high energy weapons, anything along those lines, propulsion. And and coincidentally, the article that Dr. Teller was reading was about a car that I had converted to run on a jet engine.
Now, you see, I remembered that. And then you converted another one, I believe, to run on hydrogen, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, I'm really surprised that you remember that. I don't remember.
I have a
that is one of the number one things I get asked about.
I know. I have a good memory, Bob. For some,
I'm
for
envious
some
of that. But in either case, I after a more or less lengthy interview, I accepted the job, and of course I had to go back a second time.
Can you remember any of the details of this rather lengthy interview? I mean, was a lot of it security-oriented?
Well, there was certainly a lot of security-oriented questions and so forth later on. However, keep in mind that I had just come from Los Alamos just a couple of years before.
That's true.
Where I had Q clearance, civilian, top secret clearance. So they really didn't have to go and dig deep back into my past to see if I was, of Russian descent or anything along those lines. So basically, the job just seemed like a typical research and development job. I was anxious to get started on it, and things went on. All they told me is that it was in a remote area out in the desert, and that I would fly out there maybe once, possibly twice a week, just to kind of get caught up on stuff. And they had to reinstate my clearance, which would take, perhaps a couple weeks, maybe a month at the latest.
Sure.
And so in the meantime, I was given essentially busy work to do, or at least that's how it rang in my mind. And this is typical, too, at Los Alamos. If you're initially hired there before your clearance goes through, sometimes, obtaining Q clearance can take up to 13 months. So they don't just have you sit at home. You'll, before you go to work for the lab, sit around and work on alarm systems or something like that. Doesn't, something usually below your potential, but something to keep you busy.
That rings true. I was in the Air Force. They did that to us all the time.
Yeah, it's pretty common. So I thought, well, this very typical. I had no idea what this would actually entail until I got into it, and obviously looking through their eyes, I guess it made sense that they couldn't, of course, divulge what this job would actually entail before they had, gone through all the security and whatnot. But, that's essentially how the job came about.
All right. One thing that I would think you would remember is your impressions of Mr. Teller.
I do, as far as what?
Well, what kind of guy was he? Just simple questions. What kind of guy was he?
He was, he seems to have two faces, which is strange. In talking to him one-on-one, he's a very polite, pleasant, intelligent man. However, virtually any interview you'll see of this guy, he comes across as the most pompous, mean person you have ever run into in your life.
Pompous and mean.
I don't know how else to describe him, but he was not nearly as short, not physically speaking, but I mean, if you see him in interviews, you'll see him answer questions specifically to the point, short, and on to the next question, and not be very talkative, not offer any information, other than what you're immediately talking about. And in person, he was certainly not that way. So he was, the exact opposite, very pleasant and willing to talk about anything. Of course, we didn't talk about nuclear weapons or anything.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about. Last night I interviewed Professor Michio Kaku.
Never heard of him.
A very preeminent physicist back at New York University. And he, too, has worked with Professor Teller. And I asked Professor Kaku why he had not participated in the hydrogen bomb development. And he said he simply chose not to. He wanted to go into a different direction with physics, and had quite a bit to say about Edward Teller. And apparently he was consumed during the Cold War years with national security, with being concerned about national security and...
This is Dr. Teller you're talking about.
Yes, and developing bombs. And, in fact, even today... the programs go on, I guess, with the third generation of hydrogen bombs, sort of designer bombs, Professor Kaku said. Anyway, that's why I asked you about Edward Teller. Listen, everybody hold tight. We're at the bottom of the hour, and we'll be right back. Bob Lazar and Gene Huff are my guests, and the story that you're about to hear unfold will curl your hair. I'm Art Bell. This is Coast to Coast AM. Now back to Bob Lazar and Gene Huff. Gentlemen, you're back on the air again. All right, Bob. So you got the job. You landed the job, and they had you doing busy work. And then what?
Well, not busy work hadn't started.
Oh.
That's what I thought was going to happen. Instead, where did we leave off?
Well, actually, with busy work, they were kind of...
Well, that's,
He had anticipated busy work, but now you had to go to work the first day.
Yeah, essentially. I guess essentially it was to get caught up with what was going on. And really, to my surprise, the security was a little more than oppressive. Generally you're just assigned a badge and shown the general procedures and things of that sort. This was a little different.
Are you still talking about the facility near Las Vegas, or are you talking about being flown up there now?
No, this is when finally I was flown.
Okay.
I go to McCarran Airport, right by the EG&G building, and
right.
I'd be flown to Groom Lake. As I landed there the first time, right across from where the plane parked, there's a security office, or was a security office. And that's, I believe I spent quite a while there, but, reviewing, how secure things are, so on and so forth. But, this is not where I worked. Where I did work was about, from my estimates, about 10 or 15 miles south of there. We were taken there in a converted school bus, those big Bluebird jobs that was painted kind of a dark navy blue.
There's a lot of people, Bob, who don't even believe that Area 51 exists, by the way, much less S4. I live out here in Pahrump, Bob.
Well, I think, people...
I can tell
People don't believe Area 51 exists?
Well, there are a lot of people who don't. But I can tell you, Bob, when you drive up by the VFW here in Pahrump at about 4:30 or 5 in the morning, there's a whole bunch of buses out there, and they've got signs right on the side of the buses. I saw it about a month ago, and it just says Area 51.
Oh, really?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, they're not bothering anymore to keep that secret.
I guess.